So again, welcome to the BHEARD webinar for BHEARD scholars and their advisors. My name is Fred Dirksen, and I'm the co-director of the BHEARD program together with Ann Schneller. And with me is Paul Wozniak, who is the data manager for the project. Okay. All right. First, the agenda. I just introduced ourselves, Paul and myself. The purpose of the meeting is give you information on the BHEARD program that you're now part of. We'll talk about the background of the BHEARD program, the objectives, the funding for the program. We'll talk a little bit about participating countries, some of the features of the program. Student stipends is always an important subject that we'll talk in some detail about. It is important that students return home with relevant research experience, and we'll talk about the arrangements that we've made for that. The role of the advisors is important and slightly different than normal PhD programs. A timeline for the PhD program, research proposal and budget processes, that comes a little later in the program, but important to already think about. We'll talk about professional training for BHEARD scholars, early steps for student success, the individual development plan we'll talk about in some detail. We have a database system that Paul manages that provides us with important information that the student is responsible for data entering. We want to know how you think the BHEARD program can be improved, and then in the end we'll do a short survey to see if you learned anything from this webinar. So first, the background. The BHEARD program started in October of 2012. The management entity is Michigan State University, selected by USAID, APRU, and CIMMYT. And we started out modestly with a cohort of about 24 PhD and 6 master's students in 10 US universities. And this first cohort started in August of 2013. Well, only 3 years later, as of September 16, we have a total of 81 PhDs, primarily studying in the US, and 72 MS scholars, primarily studying in Africa. 31 US universities and African universities are involved. The study areas are quite diverse, anywhere in agriculture, agricultural economics, agribusiness, plant breeding, you can read the list there, food science, ag communication, nutrition. So anything really that pertains to food security and fits with the future objectives of the various missions. We have a website that is listed there, and for students, very importantly, the Teradata website that you will have to access to provide us with the information that we need. The BHEARD program has objectives that are important for you to know because we in the BHEARD office make decisions based on whether or not certain proposed activities meet these objectives. So we want to increase the number of agricultural researchers trained at MS and PhD levels, and importantly, strengthen the scientific institutions in developing countries. So we're training agricultural scientists, not just to train agricultural scientists, but to make sure that they come home with relevant experience and information so that their institutions in their home countries are strengthened. The funding, as I'll tell you in a little bit, comes from USAID, particularly the missions. And so this program has to support the Feed the Future objective of USAID missions. And one of the important steps for success is to create linkages between scientific and higher education communities in Feed the Future countries and the US. And so we hope that in the future, there are linkages, scientific linkages between US universities and their counterparts in Feed the Future countries. We want to enhance gender balance in agricultural research institutions in developing countries.
Turn the thing down for me, please.
And
Angelica.
Other human and institutional capacity activities are included. What we're going to do is pause for just a second and mute some more microphones so that we minimize feedback. I saw one a little further down that wasn't muted. Yeah, that one. Okay. The BHEARD funding comes from the USAID Bureau of Food Security, Office of Agricultural Research and Policy through CIMMYT, and the USAID missions in participating countries. And so they're the folks that fund the program and therefore have a lot of say in how the program is conducted. As I mentioned, the Michigan State University is the implementing entities. We have 3 co-directors, Ann Schneller, myself, and then Eric Crawford. We have a student placement office. Catherine Greenhalgh is the placement coordinator. She's on maternity leave right now. Paul Wozniak is the office assistant, but really manages the data. Kelly Upton helps us in the office, as does Carolyn Fredline. There's a lot of work to be done on the financial side, and Mitch Miley is our financial manager, and he's assisted by James Prattle. Students will have a lot of interactions with Mitch when it comes to financial matters. And then Mark Meyer is our communications manager. When we started the BHEARD program in 2012, we had 4 participating countries. Now we're up to 11. And they're listed here, Bangladesh and Cambodia in Southeast Asia, and then the rest in Sub-Saharan Africa, including Ghana, Kenya, Liberia, Malawi, Mali, Mozambique, Rwanda, South Sudan, and Uganda. The BHEARD program is very comprehensive. It's one of the most comprehensive scholarship programs that I know of, meaning that almost anything that students do is funded. So these the funds include funding for testing and visa applications, travel to the US and back home, allowances such as settling in allowances, books, lab fees, laptop, printing, binding, theses, return baggage, among others. Of course, tuitions and fees are provided for, as are stipends. Students get to take a pre-dissertation trip home, and the U.S. advisor is funded to visit the student's home country, usually during thesis research. There is thesis research seed grants and post-degree research grants as well. Importantly, the degree is granted by U.S. universities. Now, this is a topic that comes up quite commonly, and I want you, the student, as well as the professor, to be aware of stipend provisions through BHEARD. As I'll show you a little later on, there's a timeline in which 3 years of the PhD program is spent in the US, 1 year in country during the research phase. And so the stipend is divided in 2 time periods. First, the time in the US. And during the time in the US, the student's US stipend is determined by US universities and departments. So when we set up the program, we had a choice to make. We could say, okay, all BHEARD students should get the same stipend, but that would mean that student stipends in home departments would differ from BHEARD stipends, or we could say that students would have the same stipend as is determined by their home department in their home institution. And we chose the latter. So students' US stipends are determined by US universities and departments. And so what you'll find that in different institutions and different departments, these stipends differ. So we're aware of that, but we want to make sure that the students in each department get the same stipend as other students in that department. USAID has minimums, and we know that all the stipends that our students get are above that minimum. And then the home institution continues to pay normal study leave allowances. So while the student is in the US, it is customary that the home institution pays the normal study leave allowance. During research phase in country, the home institution continues to pay the normal study leave allowance, but the students do not get their US stipend. For those students currently not employed by a home institution, BHEARD will provide a stipend determined in consultation with the USAID country mission. We work with each country mission to determine what's a reasonable stipend for a student, say, doing a PhD dissertation work in country, and we determine what that number is, and we provide that to students if they don't get a study leave. This is probably the most important slide from a BHEARD success perspective, and that is that students must return home to their home institution with relevant research training. And there are really two pieces to this. First of all, they must return home, and then they must return home with relevant research training. And so here are some of the provisions in the BHEARD program that ensures that the students go home as well as goes home with relevant research training. First, the students have a J1 visa, and so this visa is canceled when they leave the US, and so that does not allow the student to stay. Students that are employed by home institutions are on study leave and sign a bond that they will return to that institution. The research is conducted in country, and this is an important point that I want to emphasize. Often it's much easier to guide a PhD student in the US and conduct that research here in the US. The disadvantage of that approach is that the research done in the US may not be doable or even applicable to research that's needed in country. And so it is an important requirement of the BHEARD program that the research is conducted in country. Furthermore, thesis or dissertation defense is conducted in country by use of video conferencing. And this is also an inconvenience, much easier to conduct a defense here in the US, but USAID insists on this provision to help make sure that students that are completed with their program don't have an opportunity to stay in the US. The US advisor is funded to travel to the home country to help with thesis or dissertation research and establish linkages. And this is a very useful portion of the program. The US advisor often goes to the home country of the student, not just to help with research, but also to help with other academic chores, such as maybe looking at curriculum or giving presentations or looking for opportunities for collaboration. And so we have already experienced that really helpful linkages are established between US universities and home institutions that are long-lasting. After the student has completed the degree, BHEARD provides a small post-degree research grant to get the student going in their new, now no longer a student, a new faculty member or a new PhD holder, gets going in their new life with a post-degree research grant. Finally, bringing dependents to the US is strongly discouraged. It is essentially not allowed. And again, this is a point of discussion. Sometimes it's very inconvenient for some, but again, it makes it more likely that students return home and do not stay in the US after the degree is completed. This is a slide that describes the advising arrangement, and it just has to be clear that the US advisor has the overall responsibility for the graduate program, just like that advisor would be responsible for any other graduate student in their program. But we also have an in-country advisor, and this in-country advisor must be chosen early in the proposal development process in consultation with the student, the US advisor, and the home institution. And the in-country advisor has proven to be invaluable in making sure that the research that is being proposed is not only relevant, but also doable in country. And so the in-country advisor participates in developing the proposal with the US mentor and student. Depending on their background, this person may be a member of the thesis committee. The in-country advisor provides country context for the research and facilitates the research at the home institution. And so students who are just starting the program, please start thinking about who the person is in your institution who could best fill this role. So a few more words about the role of the US advisor. As I mentioned earlier, the US advisor is overall responsible for the student's graduate program. This includes required courses. Students should take full number of credits per semester under the graduate assistantship. If you need additional credits, make sure you get prior approval from BHEARD on that. Of course, the US advisor is very important in selection of the graduate committee. The US advisor is also very important in helping develop the dissertation research objectives, and they have to be relevant to the Feed the Future objectives of the mission. Now, those Feed the Future objectives are quite broad, so that generally isn't a problem, but it has to be sort of in the direction, under the umbrella of the Feed the Future objectives of the mission. The research proposal must be approved, first, of course, by the graduate school, the committee, the IRB at the US university, but there are additional approvals that include the in-country advisor, the BHEARD office, and the USAID mission in the home country. These approvals by the latter three listed here are really not sort of technical approvals of the proposal, but to make sure that the proposal is in line with the general objectives of the mission and the Feed the Future objectives of the mission. Of course, the US advisor has to make sure that all graduate school requirements are met. And then there are some shared responsibilities with the students. The student and the advisor are responsible for developing the individual development plan, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Shared responsibility with the students for timeline and budget constraints. Shared responsibility with the student to communicate effectively with the in-country advisor. It's very helpful if the in-country advisor is intimately involved with proposal development and is kept in the loop on sort of progress with the project. And then the US advisor works with the student to seek additional research funding when that's necessary. So here's the PhD program timeline. This slide shows 4 years. Year 1, 2, 3, and 4. In each year, of course, there is semester 1, 2, and then a summer, and then there's semester 3, 4, and summer, semester 5, 6, and summer, and then semester 7, 8. As I mentioned earlier, the first 3 years generally are spent in the US. During that time, coursework is done, the graduate committee is selected, the proposal is developed and defended. There's literature review and preliminary research and method development. And so in most cases, there's significant research being conducted during these first 3 years. During the first 3 years, the student goes home on the pre-dissertation trip. This trip is designed to sort of pave the way for the final year of research in country. And then in year 4, the student returns for research to their country. The US advisor makes a trip, and there's thesis completion, video defense in country. And so you can see that if you would start your research at the end of year 3, at the beginning of year 4, there would be very little time for meaningful research. And so in the first 3 years, there's research activity, but it is important that a major portion of the research is done in country and that this research is doable in country. So here are some here's some information on research proposal development. As you're now, I'm sure, very aware, the research is done, at least a substantial portion of that, in the home country. As I mentioned, the project meets the Feed to Future and BHEARD objectives. Both advisors help and approve development of the proposal. Research must be doable in the home country, and I want to talk about that a little more. Sometimes we get a question, there's research equipment not available in the home country, and so the proposal that we have is not really doable there, so why don't we just do it in the US? And this is still important research for the country. We will not approve that kind of proposal. The reason for that is that when students go home, they shouldn't just end their career at the end of their PhD program. That really should be the start of a research career. And so the research that they are doing during their PhD program must be doable at home. If possible, we'd like to see integration of research with existing funded projects in country, and in some countries that's been really very effective. BHEARD provides dissertation seed research funding. Currently, that's about $10,000. Sometimes that's plenty for a particular research project. In other cases, it's not. And when it's not, we hope that the US advisor works with the student to seek extramural funding needed for the proposed research. So BHEARD has project submission requirements so that we know the kind of research that's being done before it's actually conducted. And the student submits their proposal, budget, and timeline through Teradata. We'll talk about Teradata in a minute. That's the database that we have in which we collect all the data that we need on all of our students. The BHEARD Management Office approves the proposal and budget. The proposal does not have to be very detailed. We're only talking about a 3 or 4 page proposal that gives us the opportunity to make sure that the proposal is in line with the Feed to Future objectives of the missions. The missions get to see this proposal also, and sometimes make very useful comments on the direction that the student hopes to go. So this submission then includes a timeline for completion and budget. And the approval process must be completed before the student returns home to conduct their research, obviously, so that we can have an influence on what is being done before the research has been actually started. And of course, because the degree is granted by the US university, the US advisors must ensure that the proposal is approved at the US institution. Okay, so this slide is entitled Professional Training for BHEARD Scholars. And our experience is that BHEARD scholars are likely to assume major leadership positions in their home country. With a PhD from the US, these scholars are uniquely trained and uniquely suitable for major leadership positions, all the way from country presidents to presidents of institutions or department chairs or something like that. And so USAID is very keen on making sure that our BHEARD scholars get some training beyond the technical training, namely training in the area of professional development. And US institutions have professional training opportunities for graduate students, and we are hoping that the students make full use of these opportunities that are on our US campuses. The individual development plan is now required by NSF and is strongly recommended by NIH, and we hope that the students, the BHEARD scholars, will develop such an individual development plan and make use of these leadership opportunities that are training opportunities that are available on campus. So to talk about this a little more, an individual development plan goal is to integrate for individuals a personalized curriculum of professional development with a plan for disciplinary training. And so this individual development plan would list the courses, the kind of research you want to do, but also the professional development plan that you have in mind. And the outcome, we hope, is a prepared individual who is ready to meet the demands of a research position, and to help the students and their advisor sort of develop an individual development plan. There's a link here that you may want to save. And this link goes to a questionnaire that asks you about what are your goals in terms of professional development, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and what opportunities in terms of individual development are there on your campus that you hope to make use of. And so this is information that needs to be entered in Teradata so that we have some idea as to what plans you have. I usually talk to each individual student and their advisor once a year, and we'll certainly talk about how you're doing in terms of developing this plan. Here's a bit more information on professional training and examples of areas that you may want to spend some time in. And this slide is divided in research, leadership, and responsibility, professional development and teaching. And so professional training could be learning more about grant writing skills, or collaboration for research scholarship and publications. Under leadership and responsibility, very important to get some training in responsible conduct of research and scholarship. This is required at MSU, and I'm sure in most other institutions. But it may include confidentiality in the peer review process, or leadership in the discipline. Under personal development, students might find that time management is something to work on, or negotiation and conflict management. And similarly in teaching, teaching and mentoring students is an example of an area that the students may be interested in learning more about. And so the professional development plan then would include not all, but some of these that make sure that the objectives of professional training that the students have are met through these training opportunities. Okay, so here are some early steps of student success that we have found that are very helpful to make sure that students stay on track. So the first one is develop an individual development plan early, and we've talked about that already. The sort of culture of attending class and lab meetings and that sort of thing may differ for different students. And so it's important that the advisor and the student work together to set expectations for class attendance, lab meetings, professional development, and those sorts of things. Graduate committees, of course, are very helpful in making sure that students stay on track. And so selecting a graduate committee as soon as possible is important. We like to see a layout of the entire coursework plan as soon as possible, and also begin research proposal development as soon as possible. The in-country advisor is usually very helpful in making sure that the research in country is doable. And so to have a person like that identified and incorporated in the process, maybe even under committee, is important. And of course, careful monitoring of academic progress. We require that academic progress is entered into Teradata on a semester basis, and so we keep track of this as well. And that way we have an opportunity to work with the student and the advisor if there are issues there. And then effective communication with the BHEARD office. We're here to help. We're here every day. We have placement people. We have financial people. We have people here that can help with Teradata and data collection. If there are policy decisions, the co-directors are there to answer questions. And so make sure that if you have any questions, you immediately contact the BHEARD office, usually by email, to make sure that we can help. This slide is the student database system, or Teradata, and I'm going to hand this over to Paul to tell us a little bit more about this. Paul?
Okay. I'll just move this over a little bit. Hi, everybody. So BHEARD, right now we are managing almost 200 current students and lots of applications from other countries. And right now we're managing all of these student applications and files in a online integrative database system called Teradata. All students, we created an application for them when they first applied to the program, and then we keep track of their information when they're in their university program and when they finally go home to do their research. The students are required to log in to Teradata and keep their documents and information up to date. I'll show you an example of the website in just a second. But some of the things that we ask for when they're in their university program, once they start their program, are semester grade reports and evaluations. We'll ask them at the end of the semester how they're doing and a submit grade report. There's also a degree completion plan, which again is most of this information. It's just information that they're already discussing with you, the advisor, and what we're just asking for is a copy of that information as well, so that we can keep track of where they are. Research proposal documents and travel dates and emergency contacts. And again, there's places for all that information. Students are also required to register travel through Teradata when they're visiting family internationally or for domestic conferences. If they're just going up the road, that's not an issue. But if they're planning on doing domestic or international conferences or traveling home, especially if they're traveling internationally, then there's paperwork that we have to do with their visa documents. And so there's a place for them to register travel. We ask that students register their travel with us at least 30 days in advance. Again, it really just helps us keep track of where the students are for our purposes. So then here's a copy of the website. I'm just going to click on the link here. And this is what the homepage. Unfortunately, advisors don't really have access to the page, but we encourage advisors to refer their students here. So students would log in on the login page and they would see different applications. The system also sends them email reminders if they're missing documents, so that they don't have to check in all the time. And then for travel registration is this bottom link here. It says travel registry. You just click this button, signs them in, asks for information. And if they have questions about travel policy, there's a link for that as well. So let's close that. So yeah, there we go.
Thanks so much, Paul. Okay, so this is really the end of the presentation that I have. We would like to know how the BHEARD program can be improved, and maybe the best place to start there is the questions. And so let's look at the questions that are here. It says, is there any way that the defense can be done in the US? And can the student do the third year of research in country in the final year here? So the first question can the defense be done in the US? And the answer is no. We've had this question many times. We've consulted with this on USAID. And let me just talk about this a little bit. There's been participant training programs in the past as well. So 80s and 90s, there were participant training programs. And one of the biggest criticisms of the program, not just sort of from the general public, but also from Congress, was that some students did not go home. And so they then would get taxpayer-funded graduate programs without the benefit of improving the home institution or helping the developing country increase their food security. And so there's a real worry about students not going home. And one of the ways to make it more likely that the students go home and stay home is to have this provision, and that is that the thesis or dissertation defense is done in country, so that when the student is finished, they are at home and with less jeopardy of them staying in the US. So similarly, the 3-year and 1-year time frame is flexible. Sometimes students need to go home earlier to do planting, say. Planting seasons varies depending on where you are. And so certainly there's flexibility in this 3-year, 1-year model. But it is unlikely that we would approve the full final year here in the US for the same reasons. You know, we want the students to do a substantial portion of the research in country. Of course, if they're doing it in the US, that's not what we want to see. And then also, when the program is completed, they would be in the US, and we would discourage that. There's another question. My student's research will be completed in Ghana, meaning that he has to start the research as early as February 17. I'm already seeking grant opportunities for this research. Would USA be willing to consider BHEARD proposals for funding? I would say there's no reason why USA would not consider proposals from BHEARD scholars for funding. In fact, USA likes to see synergism between various programs. And so I would certainly encourage you to submit programs anywhere, but certainly to USAID. Here's another question. Is BHEARD following up if home institutions are paying full salaries? Yes, we are. It is sometimes the case that home institutions promise to pay a student stipend during the research phase, and then sometimes or somehow renege on that promise. We want to be sure that students have a stipend during their research phase. So if that's the case, then we'll step in and provide that stipend. I do want to emphasize that while in country, while in the home country, BHEARD does not pay a US level stipend. And the reason for that is obvious. The US cost of living is much higher than in country. We don't want students in country to have a disproportionate salary relative to other people in country. And so while in country doing research, we provide a locally appropriate salary. So how much funding will be provided for the post-degree completion and re-entry to our current job back home? Currently, that grant is $2,500. So it's a small grant, but it will help you get going once you have received your PhD. My student only got a 1-year visa. Is this common for other BHEARD students? I cannot answer that question. I'm not a visa expert, but Catherine Greenhalgh and others in the office are. So would you please email us that question, and we'll look into specifically what's going on in this case. Is it feasible for faculty advisors to be copied on email from BHEARD to the students in terms of due date reminders for entry into Teradata. Paul, can you answer that?
We will do as best as we can. Right now, yeah, if they're, for your student, if you just want to let us know, we will try to remind advisors. What we do for the semester evaluations is that we also send out an evaluation to advisors in addition to the students. So there, you actually have the advisors have a separate questionnaire via a Google survey to respond to how your student is doing. So yeah, I think that would be helpful to send advisors those reminders as well, and then they can help to follow up with students.
The next question is it possible to have two in-country advisors, especially if both are directly overseeing different aspects of similar projects? And the answer is yes. It's certainly fine to have two advisors, particularly if each one of them contributes something differently. You and your advisor may decide to have both serve on your dissertation committee or not. It depends on their background and their interest. And yeah, you can certainly do that. Next question is, are faculty trips to a research site registered in Teradata 2? Paul, you want to?
Sure. So right now for trips, we have a question in the travel registration questionnaire that the students fill out that asks if their faculty is going to be traveling or going to be visiting them on the trip as well. If they answer yes, then we actually send out a separate questionnaire to the faculty that's just a short, what's your name, who's your student, where are you traveling? So we'll follow up with the advisor separately if the students indicate that, yes, they're planning on, that the advisor is intending on traveling, or if the advisor contacts us directly, they know about the trip they're planning on. So not for, I should clarify, not really for domestic conferences per se, but if it's something like research in the student's home country, that's where we would be interested if the advisor is also planning on traveling.
Yeah, the funding for the advisor travel is already in the SEP contract with your university. And so the funding is already at your institution, so that you basically follow the travel requirements for your own institution, but let us know when you're planning to go and visit the student in their home country. So next question is, my student will need to travel to Ghana at least twice a year to make sure that his research plots are on track. Are there any restrictions to this with the BHEARD program? And the answer is, we would like to, if you are going to deviate from the 3 one-year model, like this would be, then we'd like to discuss that with you. And if there's good rationale, like there appears to be in this case, there's plots to be visited and that sort of thing, we'll talk about that and certainly, I would say, approve that on a case-by-case basis. Sometimes students want to go home for reasons that are not as justifiable as what seems to be in this question, and so we simply want to talk about it. But if it's part of the research program, we'll make it work. Here's another question. If the reentry fund is only $2,500, then how can we run the research that we are learning here? It needs millions of dollars with BHEARD help fund for projects. Yeah, and so it is true that students, after they receive their PhD, and if they need to do research in country, will require much, much more than $2,500. But there's only so much that the BHEARD program can do. These sorts of funds need to come from donor agencies from different countries, from USAID, from World Bank, and as you say, millions of dollars are required. BHEARD simply cannot be responsible for that. What we're trying to do is make sure that when you have your PhD, you have something to get going on, hopefully generate some preliminary data, so that those data then can be used for much larger grant applications to other donors. Next question is, my student is scheduled to complete coursework in 2.5 years. Is the timeline flexible enough for him to return earlier than the indicated 3 years? And absolutely yes. We, in fact, encourage students to go home earlier. Data indicate that the less time away from the home country, the more likely it is that the student effectively integrates back into the research scene at home. And so, yes, if the coursework is done in 2.5 years and the student can go home after that, we are very supportive and we encourage that. I think we've seen this question already, but maybe it's a repeat of the same question. Is it possible to have 2 in-country advisors, especially if both are directly overseeing different aspects of similar projects? And the answer is yes. We'd be delighted to see 2 people involved. I already mentioned that 1 or both or none could be part of the dissertation committee. If they're willing to help support the students' research in country, we'd be delighted to see that. In fact, in Teradata, there is an opportunity to enter the name of, or names in this case, of in-country advisors to make sure that we have some data on who actually is involved in this aspect of the program. Okay, I just asked my student to check, and she also only received 1-year visa, but she is checking the paperwork besides the stamp. Does she need to do anything regarding this? Unfortunately, like I say, I don't have an answer for that, but if you could just send an email to the BHEARD office, we'll get back to you right away on whether this is an issue. My understanding is that these visas extend for 3 years, if it's only a 1-year visa, we'd have to look into that. But again, this is not my area of expertise, and so we do have people in the office that are very experienced in this area, and so if you could just ask this by email, then we'll get you the right answer. So would the student be still provided the BHEARD stipend if they return to home country earlier to finish the research? And the answer is no. During the time that the student is in the US, we want to make sure that there's an appropriate stipend commensurate with what other graduate students here in this country get. And again, this is based on equity with other graduate students, cost of living, leases for apartments and things like that. Similarly, when the student is in their home country, we want to make sure that their stipend at that time too is commensurate with what's normal locally. And as you can imagine, you would create quite an inequity if you have a student home for an extended period of time, making a US stipend that may be higher than, say, their department chair might make. And so we want to make sure that the stipends that we provide to our students is appropriate for the location that they're in. Next question is, what financial facility will be provided to in-country advisors? Advisors are paid in my country. Yes, and this question has come up previously also. And this is a cultural difference with the US. In the US, it's part of a professor's job to provide advice to students, and we hope that that will happen in countries as well. So BHEARD will not provide a stipend to an advisor. We would like to convince them that this is part of what they do for a living. It's good for them, it's good for the student, it's good for the home institution. And in fact, we have a lot of experience now with in-country advisors, and while this question has come up, we have not seen anybody refuse to be an advisor because of lack of stipends. So specifically, there is no stipend for in-country advisors provided through BHEARD. So another question is, can the additional advisor be from a CG center dealing with crops but not the home country? This is if we feel that the additional person can greatly benefit his research. And the answer is yes. Again, we very much encourage integration of institutions. It's absolutely great if a CG center is involved in the research, build linkages with the home institution and maybe the US university. So yeah, this is something that I would be very excited about seeing happening to integrate maybe 3 institutions, a CG center, a home institution, and then a US university. Another question is, how much does BHEARD provide for the research project? Is the budget flexible? And as I mentioned earlier, currently BHEARD provides $10,000 to support the research. Is it flexible? There is some flexibility. And again, what we want to see is a research proposal, a budget, and a timeline before making any commitments. And sometimes we see a budget that's under $10,000 and we see items that we think are excessive. And so we cut that down. We very much encourage the US advisor and the student to look for extramural funding. Some research costs way more than $10,000 and well beyond the number of dollars that BHEARD can provide. And so, again, in our experience now, we've seen enormous leveraging of funds through this BHEARD program from other sources. So many advisors have grants from other agencies that are very beneficial to the BHEARD Scholars Program. On rare occasions, do we realize that there aren't any extramural funding beyond what we can provide, and then we talk about, okay, what can we do to support this research? It seems important, it seems well designed, we need a few more dollars, can we help with that? And so that there is some flexibility there if needed. Next question is, if the student returns early, can the saved funds from the stipend be used for this research? And again, the answer is no, not without approval. So these subcontracts have particular categories, and the expectation is that within reason we stay within the numbers for each particular category. So it's not necessarily so that if there's savings in one area that can then be used in another area. Again, we want to make sure that these programs are cost effective. We do it at as low a budget as we can. If money in subcontracts are left over, then those monies can be used to support other students. So we look at that on a case-by-case basis. We hope that $10,000 is enough to support the research. We next hope that if it's not, there are extramural funds to support additional research. And then if that's neither of those factors work, then we talk about how can we provide some flexibility to get the research done anyway. And truthfully, we have, I don't know, 70 or 80 students now in their research phase, and we have been able to make sure that everybody had enough funds to get the work done. I'm getting hard to get help from my colleagues as they do not have any financial support. I assume this is referring to an in-country advisor. If this is the case, send me an email, send BHEARD an email, and we can talk about that. In our experience, we have had very, very good collaboration between BHEARD scholars and their inter-country advisor, in spite of the fact that there is no financial support for the in-country advisor through BHEARD. So I'd like to see who we're talking about and that sort of thing. Because as I mentioned, in my experience, we've had excellent collaboration with in-country advisors.
That's it.
Okay. Are there additional questions? I think on our chat page we have answered all of the questions. Are there any additional questions? Okay, well, this gets us close to the end of this webinar then. A couple points. We are recording this, and so this will be placed online. A link will be on the BHEARD website, so for those of you that weren't able to attend, this information will be there for you. We also would be very grateful if you could click on the link that's on your screen now and complete this very short survey to help us improve this webinar for future use. So if I don't see any more questions, then I think we're right on time. We want to be respectful of your time. It's 4 minutes before 2. And so if you would take just a few minutes to complete this survey, I would be most grateful. So thank you for attending this webinar. Welcome to the new students. Great success in your program. As I've always mentioned to U.S. advisors, I'm very grateful to the excellent work that you're doing. It's really fun to talk to advisors and their students, which I do on an individual basis every year, and see how well folks are doing. So you're doing tremendous work. Your work has great impact, and we in the BHEARD office are very grateful to you for the excellent work that you're doing. So with that, I will...
So actually what I'm going to have you do is highlight and put that in the chat window.
Okay, so what I've been asked to do is see if I can copy this. I guess I may have to go out and then copy this here, and then put it in the chat window. Chat, and then here, paste it. Okay. So the link should be in the chat window, and if you could click on that, then that would be great. And that seems to work. Okay, this would be great. Thank you very much. And yeah, if you could just take a few minutes to complete the survey, we'd be very grateful. Okay, with this, thank you very much for attending, and bye-bye for now.